Discover 5 sinister trick-or-treating tales that reveal terrifying secrets this Halloween. The leaves rustled ominously as night fell in the quiet suburb of Maplewood. Families gathered, excitement buzzing in the air. But little did they know, something dark and sinister was lurking beneath the jovial facade of candy-coated smiles. The Johnsons, like the rest, were filled with anticipation. Mark, a tall figure with broad shoulders, looked down at his kids, Emily and Jake, in their bright, cheerful costumes, unaware of the shadows creeping at the edges of their perfect little world. "Let us go, gang!" Mark exclaimed, the warm light from their porch casting long shadows that danced across the yard. But as they ventured out, something felt off. The streetlights flickered, struggling against the encroaching darkness. The laughter of children echoed, but an undercurrent of unease flowed just beneath it. Sarah shivered. The excitement felt heavy, teetering dangerously toward dread. As they moved deeper into the neighborhood, Sarah caught Whisper's hushed tones weaving a chilling melody as they twisted through the night air. "Did you hear that?" she murmured, clutching Jake's hand tightly. But Mark dismissed it as Halloween excitement. Little did they know they weren't the only ones feeling the weight of an unshakable fear. The flickering lights cast a ghostly glow, revealing fleeting shadows that seemed to shift and move independently, unsettling glimpses of something watching. "Maybe it's just the decorations," Mark chuckled, but a shadow darting at the end of the street made him doubt it. The Roberts, with their extravagant Halloween display, seemed oblivious, though he couldn't shake the feeling that their opulence served a far darker purpose. Suddenly, panic hit them all when whispers emerged about missing pets: Fido from next door, Bella from across the street. Each family with a tale of woe that fed the fire of suspicion and anxiety. "Something isn't right," Sarah declared, determination igniting in her eyes. She insisted on investigating, summoning the courage to approach the Roberts mansion, its looming presence feeling like a specter in the night. The building, draped in cobwebs, stood silent. As she stepped closer, her heart raced, echoing her fears that this was no neighborhood celebration but the entrance to something terrifying. Before she could even turn back, a voice from the shadows gripped her heart. "Looking for something?" Mr. Price loomed from the darkness, a self-appointed neighborhood watch captain with a charm that twisted into something menacing tonight. "We're protecting our community," he smiled, but the way his eyes glinted felt anything but safe. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As fear intertwined with curiosity, darkness fell heavier than before. A sudden crack echoed the sound of something sinister splitting the night, sending them into a frenzy, candy clutched in their trembling hands. The street, once bright with laughter, felt suffocating. A chilling scream pierced the air, and the oppressive silence returned, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. Something was out there, hungry, and it was hungry for more than just treats. With their hearts pounding, each family was left asking the question that haunted their every step: were they being hunted, or had they unwittingly become part of a far greater nightmare? Mark's eyes darted toward Sarah, who stood frozen, her breath quickening as the reality of their situation set in. "We need to go back," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," he said, his tone firm yet trembling. "We can't just turn around. We have to find out what's happening." Jake clutched Emily's arm, his costume-esque cape already rumpled from fear. "Dad, can we please go?" The innocence of his plea struck like a blade in the tense air. Mark exchanged a glance with Sarah. They both knew leaving now might be unwise, but staying was a gamble. As they stared into the shadows, the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened, oppressive like a wet blanket, and even the streetlights seemed to falter, dimming at the edges. Then, the whispers came again, urgent, frantic, slicing through the silence. Come here, the wind seemed to beckon them, teasing their nerves. It wasn't just the decorations, dread pooled in their stomachs as the darkness deepened, giving birth to unnameable fears. Let us just stick together, Mark finally decided, a brave front shaking under the weight of his own uncertainty. They moved cautiously towards the Roberts mansion, every footstep echoing like a countdown, the very ground quaking with foreboding. As they approached, the grand facade of the mansion loomed before them, hidden gems of lights glimmering eerily across the yard. The elaborate decorations, once charming in daylight, now appeared grotesque, as if mocking their naivety. Ghosts hung lifeless from the eaves, and skeletons adorned the trees, grinning widely, their jaws cracking open. Look, Sarah whispered, pointing towards a patch of darkness behind the house. Is that? There, a hulking figure moved. It melted into the shadows, the outlines barely forming before disappearing again. Mark's heart raced, each beat echoing like a drum. We should call the police, he suggested, his voice straining against instinct. The phones, Emily squeaked, I can't get a signal. The children were right, the world felt utterly disconnected, as if the neighborhood itself had been buried beneath layers of dread. It's like we're being watched, Jake muttered, eyes wide with terror. Look! Sarah shouted suddenly, pointing at the next block. A flicker caught her attention, a house across the street, its lights flashing in time with a strangled wail. Come on! We need to see! She urged, turning to bolt toward it, pulling Jake. Mark hesitated but followed the lead, his instincts fighting against the thrill of impending danger. As they neared, the front door swung open, spilling faint light and an eerie invitation. In the open doorway stood Mrs. Henderson, her eyes wild, mouth moving as if struggling to form words. There was something behind her, a shape lurking in the entrance, glistening in the faint glow like an ominous reflection. What did you see? Mark asked breathlessly, but before she could answer, the ground trembled again, this time beneath their feet. Everyone froze, the loathsome sensation of dread solidified in their cores. The shadows around them thickened like swirling smoke, and then, a deafening crack shattered the night, a sound not from the sky, but something deep below. Get inside! Mrs. Henderson screamed, panic gripping her face. But as they turned to run, something feral erupted from the gloom, chasing them as they dashed for safety. The night air screamed with the echo of footsteps, heavy, relentless, drawing closer with every heartbeat, swallowing the laughter of children whole. A wave of terror washed over Sarah, something visceral clutched her throat. The question hit her like ice-cold water: what was hunting them? Their path to safety faded as they sprinted forward, fear mingling with the thrill of survival, closing in like a vice with the secrets of Maplewood ready to be unveiled. What lay behind the Roberts mansion would change everything forever. They bolted through the doorway, hearts pounding, adrenaline weaving through their veins. The warm glow of the living room felt like a false safety, a fragile cocoon cradling them in the chaos outside. But that idea shattered instantly when the door slammed shut behind them with a bone-rattling bang. Lock it! Mark shouted, his eyes darting around in panic. Sarah fumbled with the rusty lock, her fingers trembling. The kids huddled together, eyes wide and breathless, shadows dancing across their faces in the flickering light of the chandelier. What was that thing? Jake's voice trembled, his small hand squeezing Emily's. She didn't reply, staring into the depths of the hallway, where the dark seemed to breathe. Mrs. Henderson stepped back from the door, her face pale, eyes clouded with fear. We have to get out now. But the moment her hands reached for the knob, another shuddering crack vibrated through the house, louder this time, resonating like thunder. It felt as though the floor beneath them might open up and swallow them whole. Mark glanced around frantically. We can't go back out, we don't know what's out there. His heart raced, battling every ounce of logic that screamed it was a mistake to stay. Where's south the nearest street? Or better yet, where's the closest car? To their surprise, Mrs. Henderson didn't respond. Instead, she turned, her gaze fixed down the hallway as if something sinister had captured her attention. "Hurry," she whispered, almost in a trance. Before Mark could shout at her, a flicker of movement caught his eye from the shadows of the long corridor. He squinted, straining to see, when suddenly, the hallway lights flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness. The air thickened, carrying an unsettling stillness, broken only by a low, resonant whisper that seemed to emerge from the very walls. "Help us, help us." It was a chorus of hushed voices layered with anguish and despair, echoing around them like the lament of lost souls. "Shut up!" Mark roared, trying to drown out the voice, but fear curled tighter around him as he felt a cold breeze swirl past them. "We need to get the children out of here. Look!" Sarah pointed into the darkness, her breath hitching. A figure emerged, hazy and distorted, like fog. Mark squinted. It was too undefined to discern, all they could see were the outline of eyes gleaming faintly. "What do you want?" Mark shouted, his voice cracking with both fright and anger. But the figure didn't respond. It hovered there, that low wail rising to a crescendo, filling the air with its chilling melancholy. "Back away!" Mrs. Henderson shouted now, her eyes wide like saucers, face stark white. "It's not what it seems." Without warning, the figure lunged forward, but the instant it crossed the threshold of light, it vanished. Like smoke dissipating in strong wind. They were left shivering in the silence that followed, breathing raggedly, trying to process the terror they had just witnessed. "Should we leave the house?" Emily asked, her voice barely a whisper, clutching Jake as her eyes flitted towards the blackened hallway. Mark looked to Sarah. The uncertainty on her face reflected his own fears. He felt torn, the instinct to escape battling against the desire to protect his family from whatever waited outside. "We stay," Mark said defiantly, though his stomach churned. "We find a way to end this." Suddenly, a scraping noise echoed behind them, slow and deliberate, like nails on old wood. It was coming from the entrance again, as if something were trying to get in. His heart thundered as a shadow shifted beneath the door, pulsating with a life of its own. "Check the kitchen!" he shouted, desperation making his voice raw as he shuffled the kids toward the hall. But they froze as the door rattled violently, a low growl escaping the cracks as the outline of something unholy pressed against it. "What do we do?" Jake whimpered, eyes darting. Mark looked to Mrs. Henderson, who was now staring at something just behind him. Her face drained of all color. "There's nowhere else to go but forward," she breathed. As the door buckled under the weight of whatever horror lurked outside, Mark knew this was just the beginning. They had ventured down a path with no return, and the clock was ticking. "Get ready," he hissed. "It's about to get worse." The house echoed with a spine-chilling growl, shadows creeping forward, the night's nightmare ready to consume them whole. What awaited them beyond the door was a revelation that would shred their understanding of everything they once believed. The door shook violently, rattling on its hinges as the low growl escalated into a ferocious snarl. Mark rushed to the front window, hoping to glimpse what terror lurked outside. He pressed his forehead against the glass, heart racing, breath fogging the surface. But all he saw was the night endless and black, swallowing every trace of light. It wrapped around the house like a predator, waiting. "We can't let it in," Jake whimpered, his small body shaking against Emily, who had wrapped her arms around him tightly. "What is it?" Sarah breathed, her eyes darting wildly. The children squeezed tighter together, whispering reassurances to each other, but Mark could see the dread crawling over their faces. Mrs. Henderson stood frozen, eyes glued to the door. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves." Her voice trembled, but steel tinged her words. "There has to be something nearby." Mark scanned the room. The glimmer of an iron fire poker caught his eye. He grabbed it from the corner, feeling the weight of it in his hand. "We can use this," he breathed. But deep down, he knew it was not enough. As the growling intensified, a crack split through the doorframe, framing the silhouette of something impossibly large. Mark felt the air grow colder, seeping through the cracks like liquid dread. "Back away from the door!" he shouted, his heart pounding in sync with the animalistic growls echoing beyond. The children whimpered, tears forming in their wide eyes as they backed into the corner with their mother. The door rattled again, louder now. A thumping reverberated, each beat matching the pulse in his throat. "Stay close!" he yelled, gripping the poker tight. There was nowhere left to hide, and as fear surged like ice in his veins, he felt a crack inside himself, the terrifying awareness of how fragile their safety really was. Then, silence. A thick, suffocating silence that filled the room. The kind that pressed heavily against the eardrums, making Mark's heart thump louder. "What is happening?" Emily whispered, tiny hands clenching Jake's, both staring wide-eyed at their parents. Before Mark could answer, the door burst open with a forceful snap, splintering wood and unleashing a gale of icy air that swept through the room. Shadows flooded in like an army, dragging darkness into every corner, tightening around them. "Run!" Mrs. Henderson screamed, pushing the kids forward. But the shadows moved as if alive, clawing toward them as a hideous shape lurched through the doorway. It was a ghastly figure, twisted and wrong, eyes burning with a malevolent hunger, teeth jagged like broken glass. In moments, it lunged at Mrs. Henderson, who screamed, the sound piercing through the encroaching dark. "No!" Mark cried, bolting forward, driven by a primal instinct to protect. He swung the poker, the metal connecting with a sickening thud against the creature's shoulder. It recoiled, hissing a sound that dripped malice, eyes narrowing at him. "Go!" Mark shouted, feeling the adrenaline surge as he faced the creature that had slipped through the cracks of his worst fears. But the kids hesitated, their terror rooting them to the floor. "Get out!" he barked, pushing them toward the kitchen. "Find a way out." Mark tightened his grip on the fire poker, ready to defend them as the creature snarled, lunging once more. He could feel its rancid breath, hot and fetid against his skin. In that moment, something shifted in the air, an echo of laughter carried on the breeze, chilling him to his core. "Help us!" The whispers returned, louder now. Not from one source, but all around, circling like vultures. Help us, Mark froze, trying to understand. Were these cries haunting the house, a trap designed to draw them in? Desperate glances passed between him and Sarah, her face pale, eyes wide with horror. "Mark," she began, but before she could finish, the creature leapt, jaws wide. He barely sidestepped as it crashed into the wall, splintering the wood. "Now!" he roared, urging his family. As they stumbled toward the kitchen, darkness surged forward like a wave, the whispers morphing into screams of pain and terror. They were caught in a tide of despair, battling against shadows that threatened to pull them under. Mark felt a surge of determination mixed with despair. This wasn't just a monster they were losing time. The house was alive, a malicious entity eager to ensnare them forever. "Through the back!" he yelled, signaling Sarah and the kids with a frantic wave. But in that instant, a cold grip latched onto his ankle, yanking him back. He fell hard, the poker slipping from his fingers. Panic surged as he looked back to see the gaping maw of the creature inching closer. Shadows whirled around him, and the whispers grew louder, promising darkness and despair. "Mark!" "No!" Sarah screamed. But it was too late. The shadows consumed him, and the last thing Mark saw before everything went black was the terrified faces of his family, helpless and desperate. What hell lay beyond that door? What awaited Sarah, Jake, and Emily in their desperate flight? The echoes of lost souls clung to the air, their secrets buried deeper in the dark. He could feel them pulling, clawing, as the house throbbed with a sinister hunger. They had unwittingly become part of something much larger than themselves, marked by the shadows. And in that moment, the walls themselves seemed to pulse with life, whispering their next move. Because the house wasn't finished with them yet. The darkness swallowed Mark entirely. It wasn't just black, it was thick and suffocating, warping his understanding of space and time. Shadows curled tightly around him, tightening like a noose. Panic gripped him, his lungs screamed for air, but all he could muster was a guttural whimper. Suddenly, a jolt tore through him. He wasn't trapped. He was somewhere else. The air grew warmer, the shadows less malevolent. But he was alone. His family was gone, and dread crept back into his chest like biting frost. "Mark!" A voice called, echoing through the ether. It was Sarah's voice, full of fear and desperation. "Sarah!" He stretched his arms out into the void, but nothing surrounded him except an oppressive silence. The weight of the darkness shifted, twisting around him like fingers, clutching and pulling. Desperate to escape, he began to run, guided only by the haunting echo of his wife's voice. "Help us!" With each step, the emptiness thickened. The whispers returned, their tones shifting from pleading to mocking. Help us, each syllable dripped with a sinister sweetness, tugging at his heartstrings, blurring the lines of reality with their siren-esque call. "Come closer, you can save them, no." He shouted to the shadows, his voice reverberating back, swallowed whole. The whispers had amplified, forming a maddening chorus that echoed in his mind. "They're here, Mark, with us forever." Images flashed behind his eyelids, visions of Sarah, Emily, and Jake, warm smiles turning to terrified faces as they reached out for him across a chasm of darkness. The shadows writhed, morphing into their forms, but twisted, contorted, impossibly wrong. "Mark!" Another scream, clearer this time. It pulled him forward, a lifeline, stitching together the edges of his fraying sanity. He drove through the dark, desperate to find the source. Then, he burst through. Light cascaded around him, blinding and beautiful. He stumbled into a room unfamiliar and oppressive. Dust hung in the air, and cobwebs draped over every corner, each one vibrating with memory. The children's cries echoed, drawing him through a heavy door with rusted hinges. He pulled it open, cringing at the screech it produced. Inside, he found them, his family huddled together, their eyes wide, staring into a corner. A cluster of shadows danced there, flickering like dying flames. Each shadow seemed to possess a life of its own, whispering dark secrets, feeding on the fear radiating from his loved ones. "Mark!" Sarah cried, reaching out. "Help us! Don't let it take us!" Without thinking, he launched himself toward them, fists clenched. He spotted the fire poker lying nearby, grappled it tightly and hurled it at the shadows. It struck the wall, splintering the wood and sending chills down his spine. The creature in its horror shifted, forming grotesque shapes that leered, filling the room with a heavy static. "You think you can save them?" It taunted, its voice a low growl. "You're already too late." Mark's heart raced. He had to find them a way out. Back away from it. He shouted to Sarah and the kids, but panic tightened its grip. The shadows crept closer, stretching their tendrils toward the vulnerable group. Suddenly, a jagged howl reverberated through the room. Mark spun, seeing the creature a twisted parody of his worst nightmares, crawling closer, the walls trembling in its presence. Shrieking, it lunged at him, but he dodged, fueled by desperation. The poker connected again, but the creature only laughed, an echo of each lost soul from the dark. Sarah's whisper shattered him. "Please!" He rushed back toward them. In that moment, they all met his eyes, their pleading uniting them. But the shadows recoiled and surged forward, hungry and relentless. From the abyss, flickering images appeared again of laughter, birthdays, family dinners, warmth fading away. Mark felt a cold sweat crawl down his spine. What was happening? Were they being consumed? "No. I want to lose you!" He screamed, wrapping his arms around them, and then everything morphed into chaos. They gripped each other tightly, hearts pounding in sync. The shadows hissed, shrieked, and danced around them, waiting to feast. Mark's breath came fast, filled with a gut-wrenching fear, but his determination pulsed stronger. This was only the beginning. He had to face them. There must be a way to cut through that darkness. But just as hope flickered, the room shifted again, a vortex of swirling shadows closing in around them, dragging them toward a new pit of darkness. What sinister fate awaited them now? Would Mark hold his family together, or would the shadows tear them apart forever? The shadows squeezed tighter, wrapping around Mark like a vice as the room warbled and changed. He held his family close, their bodies trembling against the malice that encircled them. It was impossible to tell where one began and the other ended. Their breaths mingled in the oppressive air, fear pooling like oil on water. The walls warped and twisted, collapsing into themselves, spiraling down into an abyss of black nothingness. Mark's heart raced faster, each thud like a drum call ringing through an inescapable doom. "Mark!" Sarah gasped, clinging to him as one shadow lunged forward, sharp edges glinting like broken glass. He ducked sideways, pulling them along, but the ground morphed beneath their feet, shifting into an unreal landscape. "Where do we go?" Emily sobbed, her tiny voice breaking through the chaos. Mark's throat tightened, guilt clawing at him. "Just hold on," he shouted, forcing determination into his voice. They were the lifeline he needed. He had to save them. The shadows rippled, mocking his resolve. "You can't control what you can't see." The deep voice slithered through the air, wrapping around every word like a serpent. Fire poker raised like a sword, he spun to confront the dark creature that snickered like a child at play. Mark struck out again, the weapon cutting through the air, but the impact absorbed into the shadow, spreading shockwaves of darkness instead of destruction. "Mark, please!" Jake cried, his small hands shaking as the shadows twisted closer, morphing into their most terrifying forms, figures of half-remembered nightmares straight from Mark's past. Fear clawed through Mark's veins, mixing with the desperate resolve igniting within. "Face it!" he yelled back into the darkness. "You don't own us." Summoning every ounce of courage, he pushed the ancient poker deeper into the shapeless mass, channeling memories of laughter and love, family dinners, and summer days. Images burst forth like fireworks, blinding and beautiful. But as each memory brightened, the creature roared in anger, curling away, trying to drown Mark in a tide of shadows. They hissed, "You can't hide from truth. Don't you want to know what they did?" "What do you mean?" he growled, panic creeping back in, trying to shred the fragile hope he clung to. "Haven T, you wondered? The fears you've buried? The truths you ran from?" The shadows writhed, shifting into unsettling images of betrayal and loss, friends abandoning each other, whispered accusations piercing through trust, the weight of unspoken words. No. He couldn't accept this. Not now. Not ever. With every ounce of determination, he shoved the poker harder, forcing the creature back, his family behind him, trembling but unyielding. "Deny it as you like, Mark," it hissed, reforming with claws poised to shred. "You cannot escape your past." Then it happened. An overwhelming sensation of cold crept along his limbs, a coldness laced with recognition. He stumbled back, realizing everything: the upbringing that haunted him, the book of sins and regrets, choices that had led to this moment. "Stop it," he screamed, listening to the echoes of his own thoughts. "Isn't it time to accept what might have been?" The shadows whispered seductively, coiling around his resolve. "No. I refuse," he countered, his voice straining against the rising tide of despair. His family needed him. They couldn't live shackled to the past, nor could he allow himself to be swallowed whole. He took a step forward, every heartbeat an act of defiance. The poker still ablaze with memories, he thrust forward into the mass of shadows. As it connected, a spark of light erupted. Only then, did he realize it wasn't merely fear they were battling, it was the burden of truth. In that instant, everything shattered. The shadows wailed as the light broke through, illuminating the room, and Mark felt a moment of hope flicker within. But the shadows retaliated, shrieking with fury, twisting back around them, their forms collapsing once more into a void. "Mark!" Sarah yelled, just as the floor fell beneath their feet, both his family. And the shadows plummeting into the chasm of despair. What will it take to navigate the truth hidden in the darkness? Can Mark withstand the confrontation of his past, or is the darkness stronger than the light? The darkness swallowed them whole. Mark's stomach lurched as they fell, spiraling into an abyss that felt alive, writhing around them. The cold enveloped him, each second stretching like an eternity. A loud crash echoed overhead, fragments of the room his past tumbling into the void, lost forever. "Hang on!" Mark gasped, clutching his family tighter. He felt the dampness of sweat trickling down his back, pulses of fear racing in tandem with the sudden rush of wind. Panic clawed at him. What happened next felt unpredictable, like a muted scream escaping into thick silence. Light exploded around them, the blinding white felt so unusual after the cold darkness. The family landed hard on a soft surface, cushioned yet twisted, like they were thrown into a nightmare playground. Mark blinked, adjusting to the harsh reality, breathing heavily. "Where are we?" Jake mumbled, voice trembling as he sat up, rubbing his eyes. Mark scanned their new surroundings. It was surreal. Alleyways loomed like towering giants overhead, lined with dilapidated buildings that leaned against one another. The air felt dense, filled with whispers of hushed conversations that echoed endlessly. "We need to find a way out." Mark forced his voice to stay steady as he stood, glancing down at his family. Sarah's eyes glimmered with fear, Emily's face wet with tears. He hated himself for being the one to lead them into this. Suddenly, the whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of distressing cries. "You can't escape!" they chorused, intertwining around them like flames licking at dry wood. "Look!" Sarah pointed, her finger trembling toward an ominous figure standing at the far end of the alley. Cloaked in shadow, its eyes glowed like embers flickering in the night. The whispers enveloped it, like a dark halo that beckoned Mark closer. As if compelled, Mark took a hesitant step forward. "Who are you?" His voice broke, uncertainty swirling within. "It is a guardian of truth," it hissed. "Find it, or you will remain lost forever." "Lost?" The word lodged itself in Mark's throat. "What truth?" "Step closer, and you'll see," the figure beckoned. This chilling invitation slithered directly into his mind, promising answers shrouded by fear. "No! Don't listen!" Sarah cried out, fear capturing her words. But Mark felt a pull, his thoughts whirling as he glanced back at her. What would happen if he turned away? Would he lose them again? He glanced at the shadowy figure again. "What do you want from me?" "To unveil all that you've hidden," it whispered, a smirk curling its shadowy mouth. Mark shivered, memories cascading through him like fallen leaves in autumn, painful moments that had shaped him, haunting glimpses of regret that plagued his dreams. Shadows danced around him, flickering with every heartbeat. "Mark! Run!" Jake's urgent voice jerked him back. The feelings surrounding him shifted, a surge of panic igniting as the looming shadow began to extend, claws unfurling, reaching for him, ready to snatch him back into the darkness. Instinct kicked in as he turned. "This way!" he yelled, grabbing Sarah and Emily's hands, pulling them away from the encroaching menace. They sprinted down the alley, shadowy laughter echoing behind, weaving through twisting paths that felt alive. The buildings towered higher, leaning in as if intending to swallow them whole. Mark's breath quickened, panic filling his lungs. "Just keep moving." The shadows shifted, their whispers mocking, taunting him with the truths he fought to deny. Suddenly, the ground shook. Cracks splintered the pavement, the world around them threatening to cave in. Mark could feel the weight of all he had hidden, surfacing like dark waves rolling in. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah shouted through the chaos. I don't know. Just keep running." But Mark could feel it, the truth lurking just beyond his reach, clawing at the edges of his mind. What would happen when it finally broke free? With every step, he couldn't shake the feeling that something awaited them at the end of this alley, something that would challenge every memory and emotion he tried to suppress. What truth lay ahead, and would they survive to confront it? A shriek pierced the air, a warning echoing off the walls. They skidded to a halt, faces pale with dread. "Something is coming," Jake whispered, fear suffocating hope. And Mark realized then the true challenge was just beginning. Would it tear their family apart, or would they emerge from the darkened web of terror, forever changed? As the shadow's presence loomed closer, he breathed in deeply, steeling himself for what lay ahead. But the question hung heavy: could he protect them, or would he be swallowed whole by the shadows of his past? They barely had time to catch their breath. A shudder ran through the ground, like a primal growl echoing from the depths below. Mark's heart raced wildly, pounding against his ribcage like a caged animal desperate for escape. "Look!" Sarah screamed, pointing toward a sudden flicker in the shadows ahead. Mark squinted, eyes trying to pierce the heavy darkness. Something moved among the debris, a figure rising slowly. It unfurled against the backdrop of gloomy orange flickers from jagged windows, faces twisted in agony trapped in the glass. "I don't like this, Dad. I want to go home." Emily's voice quivered, gripping his hand tight, nails digging into his flesh. "Stay close," Mark urged, tugging both girls toward a side street while trying to keep his own panic at bay. But doubt gnawed at him. The alleys twisted like a maze, each turn only deepening the shadows, each corner a potential trap. The whispers grew louder, not just whispers anymore, but voices, pleading, screaming. "You shouldn't have come here. You will pay for the truth." "Shut up." Mark snapped, startling himself. How could he be the one to quiet them when he felt so lost? He led them on, choosing paths on instinct alone, sensing the oppressive presence closing in behind. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath him. Mark stumbled but caught himself just in time, his foot slipping over the edge of an open manhole. Blackness yawned below, a dark mouth waiting to swallow him whole. He felt a rush of wind as something swept past, leaving a cold touch on his shoulder. The shadows twisted and turned, forming shapes that clawed at his vision. A figure jumped from the darkness, a woman, pale as death, her hair wild and eyes wide. "You have to get out," she shouted, voice a rasp. "It knows what you've done." "What? Who?" Mark struggled to process her words. Before she could answer, the shadows surged. They writhed like serpents eager to strike. The woman's scream pierced through the air, as she was yanked back into the inky blackness. Mark's breath caught in his throat, horror washing over him. Jake's whimper cut through the shock. "Keep moving, now!" Mark yelled, pulling his family with him, desperation pushing him forward. They dashed down a narrow side alley, the walls pressing in. The laughter behind them morphed into something else, something darker, filled with malice. It wasn't until they rounded yet another corner that they stumbled upon an open courtyard bathed in flickering light, as if mocking their fear. They were not alone. Figures loomed at the edges, stagnant and menacing. Mark's gaze flickered over their faces, grinning skulls, hollow eyes, sinister smiles. "Welcome," one figure intoned, voice smooth like ice. "To the festival of truths." His family huddled closer, absorbing the weight of the dread that seeped into the air. A lantern swung from a crooked post, revealing twisted pathways leading into darkness. "What is this place?" Sarah whispered, frightened but curious. "Hold on tight," Mark urged, unwilling to trust in this twisted spectacle. A sudden thud behind them made his heart jump. the guardian of truth? Had it followed them here? Are you ready to inspect your secrets? The skeletal figure asked, stepping closer. The lantern light flickered, illuminating its cracked face, wide yellow teeth gleaming. Fear crawled beneath Mark's skin. The truth? This was no simple challenge. He could feel the weight of every past sin, every wrong turn crashing down on him like the very building blocks of this nightmarish vision. I'll protect them, he thought, but doubt gnawed at him. They were in the court of truths. What would they discover? And would that discovery bring them closer together or tear them apart forever? Suddenly, like a clap of thunder, the laughter erupted from all sides. Shadows lunged for them, and Mark's survival instinct kicked in. Run! Don't look back! But shadows whispered, enticing him with secrets buried deep, amidst the cheerful flicker of deceitful lights. You cannot escape what lies within. As they stumbled deeper into the courtyard, Mark felt a chilling certainty. They would have to confront their own buried truths together or apart. Dread coiled around him like a serpent, squeezing tighter with every step. Would he emerge from the shadows, or would he finally face the darkness within, knowing it might be the ultimate price? The shrieking laughter promised revelations he feared more than the shadows themselves. Mark! Jake yelled, panic cracking through his voice. What's happening? And as they stumbled deeper into the unknown, Mark's answer lay just ahead, waiting with malice in those chilling shadows. Could they outrun the truth, or was it too late? The shadows danced with feverish excitement as Mark pulled his family deeper into the chaos. He could taste the fear in the air, thick and suffocating, swirling around them like a living entity. The laughter of the figures surrounding them echoed, stretching into a warped melody that clawed at his sanity. The skeletal figure stepped closer, its voice a sharp knife slicing through the tension. Your secrets will find you here, in the light of twisted truths. Dad! Emily's voice broke through the cacophony. She was trembling, her small body pressed against him, desperate for protection. He could feel her heart racing, matching the erratic rhythm of his own. Stay close, don't let go. He urged, forcing himself to remain steady. But dread settled in his stomach like a heavy stone. The maelstrom of chaos erupted around them, swirling into a hurricane of agony and anguish. The grotesque figures moved like shadows themselves, taunting them from the corners of the courtyard. Look! Sarah gasped, pointing toward a flickering light that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly glow. It illuminated a giant stone pedestal at its center, an altar to their unraveling fears. On it lay a series of angular boxes, each engraved with symbols that writhed under the lantern's flickering light. Don't approach. Mark warned, but it felt like words meant for his own heart. Drawn in by an unseen thread, he stepped closer, unable to resist the pull, despite the primal screaming of his instincts. Those boxes, they hold your truths, the skeletal figure whispered to him, dripping malice. Open one, and see what the night reveals. A swell of terror shot through him. What secrets lingered inside those boxes? The compulsive urge to uncover the hidden and expose the raw kept whispering like a seductive promise. But at what cost? He glanced at his daughters, their faces a mask of fear. Please, let us just go, Jake whimpered, his eyes wide with tears. Mark felt the weight of his choices press down on him. The laughter intensified, as if mocking their hesitation. Then, like ice crashing through his veins, he heard a familiar whisper, soft, haunting, "You can't hide, Mark. It's your time to pay. Shut up." He roared, the words laced with fear. But the laughter only grew louder, echoing off the walls of the courtyard, bouncing back with anguish. The figures flickered, shifting closer, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Pick one. Pick one. They chanted, circling around the pedestal. Their skeletal fingertips pointed toward the boxes, as if sensing the pulse of his guilt, the weight of his choices. Mark! Sarah cried, stepping back as one of the figures lunged. It wrapped an icy grip around her arm, drawing her closer to the pedestal, her eyes pleading. "Help me." "No." Mark jumped forward, fear igniting a surge of adrenaline. He yanked her back just as the shadows seemed to erupt, clawing at his legs, intent on dragging them all into the abyss. The lantern light danced wildly, creating a frenzy of shadows, casting flickering shapes on the walls. Mark heard Jake scream, a sound so pure and filled with terror it broke through his resolve. He turned, eyes wide with desperation. "Let us run. Now!" he shouted, grabbing both their hands, pulling them toward the only exit, the darkness from which they had come. But the shadows around them pulsed with malicious glee, enfolding them like a cocoon, whispering secrets just out of reach. As they pushed onward, the once hostile laughter transformed into a low, menacing hum. Mark felt the ground beneath shift, a tremor of dread coursing through the cobblestones. He didn't know where they were headed, but he was sure the truth was lurking right behind them, close enough to touch. Then the shadows laughed again, a sound that chilled him to the core. "You can't escape, Mark. You'll face your secrets soon, very soon." What awaited them in the deep, brooding shadows? Would the truth set them free, or was it a trap leading to their inevitable doom? The chill of the unknown wrapped around them like a vice as they ran, hearts racing. And then, they stumbled across another figure waiting in the dark, one that knew their deepest fears. Would it reveal their secrets, or twist them into something far worse? As they sprinted through the dense shadows, Mark shielded his family with his body. Each heartbeat echoed like a war drum, urging him forward. The skeletal laughter danced around them, mocking the desperation that clung to their every step. "You can't hide. The truth will find you," taunted the shadows, coiling closer. "Keep running," Mark shouted, his voice raw from the fear welling inside him. Emily and Jake gripped his hands tightly, their small bodies trembling against the growing malice. The figures lurking in the darkness blended into a terrifying tapestry of despair, their shapeless forms swirling like smoke. A glimmer of light broke through the constant gloom. An exit? Mark surged toward it, driven by instinct. They dodged twisting tendrils, the laughter intensifying, suffocating them. "Face your fears," the distorted voices echoed. As they reached the glimmer, Mark stumbled forward, dragging his family towards the unknown. "We have to push through," he urged, locking eyes with Sarah, whose expression reflected both fear and fierce determination. Then they emerged into a vast, open space, illuminated by an eerie moonlight. It felt like the heart of the nightmare they had entered, a melancholy courtyard filled with otherworldly statues, each one twisting in elegant poses as if caught in a moment of agony. The ground trembled, the whispers amalgamating into desperate cries. "Help us! Help us!" they pleaded, wrapping around him in an unbreakable shroud. In the center of this forsaken patch of land stood the pedestal, pulsing like a wounded heart, surrounded by the boxes that held their darkest truths. Mark dropped to his knees, eyes wide as he took in the horror of their reality. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking like a dying ember. He felt the pull, an irresistible urge to know what lay sealed within those darkened boxes. "We face what we've kept hidden," he replied, fighting the rising tide of panic clawing at his throat. "We have to confront it." As he used his arms to steady himself, the shadows slithered back, watching intently. Their gazes burned into him, hungry, mocking, waiting. The grotesque figures surrounding them leaned in closer, as if aware that the moment of confrontation was nigh. "Choose one." They chimed in unison, the air thickened, almost suffocating, with tension. Mark's heart raced. "I don't want to choose. What if it destroys us?" he cried out, feeling the weight of their shared fear manifest heavier than lead. But deep down, he knew they had to confront what lay waiting inside. "I want to let you take them," he bellowed, pulling Emily and Jake close again, their small hands shaking as they clung to him. "Open it!" The shadows screeched, voices amalgamating into a terrorizing chorus. They surged forward, nudging Mark towards the nearest box, its engraving glinting with ancient despair. "Mark, please!" Jake cried, his voice broke through the chaos, bursting with desperation. "I'm scared." With a shaky breath, Mark knelt beside the box, heart thudding against his ribcage. "Stay close," he whispered, then lifted the heavy lid. A rush of cold air burst forth, extinguishing the flickering light from behind. Inside, darkness swirled, but from it came echoes, whispers of buried memories, truths that screamed for release. Vision struck him, glimpses of past mistakes and lost moments came flooding back. Friends turned away, loved ones hurting in ways he hadn't seen. It all crashed down around him like a wave, threatening to pull him under. "No. Not this. I won't face this," he gasped, glancing towards his family. But their eyes reflected his flickering strength. They were ready, facing the shadows together. With renewed resolve, he plunged his hand deeper into the box, grabbing onto a memory that whispered, tender yet painful. And suddenly, everything changed. Light erupted. The courtyard filled with blinding white as the shadows shrieked, recoiling from the illumination. Mark turned, heart racing, as the whispers transformed into screams, and then to cries of relief, echoing around them. The figures dissolved, retreating like smoke scattered by the wind. "Mark!" Sarah shouted, her voice laced with joy. "You're doing it. You're breaking the darkness." The warmth of the light wrapped around them, each truth unveiled, igniting a flicker of bravery. With each memory accepted, the shadows shrank, fading into obscurity. Laughter bubbled up as Emily and Jake squeezed their father tighter, a warmth spreading through their bodies, chasing the lingering fear away. "It's okay," Mark urged, moving quickly to the next box, opening them one by one. "We can face them together." With each box opened, the burdens lifted. They were lighter, freer, shackled only by the love binding them together. With one last ferocity, Mark faced the final box, the most formidable one. Clenching tight on his family's hands, he whispered words of solace. "In truth, we find strength together." He tore open the lid, and a radiant light flooded their surroundings one last time. The shadows erupted in a final howl, collapsing in on themselves like a deflated balloon, their hold severed. As the light held steady, the courtyard faded into stars, and the world spun around them, reshaping into something new. "Dad?" Jake's hesitant voice broke through. "I'm here, buddy," Mark breathed, eyes glistening with relief. They stood in a grove, warm sunlight filtering through leaves, laughter of children playing nearby mixing with the breeze. They were free. Looking at his family, he felt an overwhelming surge of gratitude. This night had scarred them, but it had also forged a bond unmistakable through the shadows, proof that love conquers darkness. They embraced each other, the cycle ending and a new dawn beginning. The past was not all darkness. It had shaped them, yes, but also outlined paths of joy, laughter, and light. Mark stood, hand in hand with his family, ready to embrace whatever life brought next, knowing they could weather it together. As they stepped forward into the next chapter, a deep sense of peace enveloped him. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger. And as the sun rose high, Mark vowed, no matter what secrets the night held, their family would always shine through it. Now, as you reach the end of this wild journey with us, don't just step away. This is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss our next exclusive stories that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the ever-hungry algorithm that drives us. The struggle is real out there, and every like helps us continue. Flood the comments section right now with your reactions and theories about this ending, because I want to see what you all think. Your voices matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see this conclusion. Let us grow this community together and dive into even more thrilling tales. Thank you for being part of this adventure. You make it worth every heartbeat.